All right, so good to see you all. Today we're doing a sequence. I'm calling it my yin sequence because this came from me doing my own practice. It's a well-rounded yin sequence, so we're going to work the hips and the spine. It's a little more advanced. So, I mean, in a sense, I don't like that word. I'm not really sure what other word to use. Maybe a little more challenging might be a word. So when I sequence for others, I very often have in mind kind of the average person's body and what the average person can do more easily. This sequence wasn't like that. Why am I sharing it, right? Why would I take something that I don't necessarily think is the easiest thing for the average person to do? Because I think it's healthy, to be honest. I teach regularly in my in-person classes and even here online. I have a regular audience. There are people who kind of come and go, but there are many people who are coming every single week to class, sometimes several times a week. So while it can be good to do things in a certain way, most of the time, I think it's good and healthy to switch things up every now and then, to do things differently, to try something new, to try something different. So while my sequencing is generally trying to find usually the easiest path through the sequence for most people, this sequence wasn't really like that because I was just kind of doing my own practice and feeling what feels good in my body. So keep that in mind. If you have difficulty, reach out to me at any point in the practice, okay? And again, my idea here is this is a wonderful practice. Again, this is what I do, or one of the things that I do on my mat, and I wanted to share it with you. The other part of that is some people, maybe not everybody, but some people might find that, oh yeah, that was really, really perfect for me, or that was great for me, because there might be other people who are like me in terms of their build or what they have going on in their body. So again, it's just sharing something from my own personal experience, my own personal practice, rather than thinking of as a teacher and okay, what is going to be best for the most people, general audience. All right, any questions before we get started into our practice? Okay, so we're going to start half butterfly, right leg straight, left foot to the inside of the thigh. And then we're just letting the upper body relax forward and down. Now, one of the differences between this sequence and the one that I do at home is I would hold each of these for 5 minutes. We just don't have time. So one of the things I had to do with this sequence is cut it down, so make it shorter. So 3 minutes for each posture, okay? As usual, you could support your forearms, forehead, left knee, but as usual, you don't want too much support or you start losing the beneficial stress of the posture, which is going to be felt mostly here, or at least it should be. As a way of example, I think I mentioned to some of you that, my back was getting better and better and better, and then like last week, it kind of went back in the other direction. There were a few things that changed for that week. I was waiting on a package, so I had to stay indoors a lot. I wasn't able to move as much, and then there was a lot of rain and some other things. I don't even remember what, but there were things that I was normally doing that I stopped doing. I couldn't do in that, and so it ended up showing up in my back as back pain. So when I'm doing this posture, at least initially as I came into it, I felt a lot of sensitivity here in my back. And again, ideally, that's not what you're feeling. In fact, if you're feeling that, we may need to examine and make sure that you aren't actually doing more harm than good. For me, I've been doing this long enough that I know that if there is any harm, it's going to be temporary, and I'll be able to get to the bottom of it. But for other conditions, other people, that may not be the case. So ideally, I would feel it here more, not here. But today, because of my sensitivity in my back, I'm feeling it more here, or as much here than I do here. Now, the longer I hold it, the more it's showing up in the leg, which is where I want it. And again, I'm just sharing this with you as an example, as a real life example of how I want you to approach the practice, what I want you to be thinking about as you do it. My assessment of the situation is, even though I would ideally not want to feel that, and this could be an indication of something going on that's dangerous, for me, I know enough about my body and my experience in these postures that if there is any downside risk, it's minimal. And the stretching for me is worth the risk. But for you, that might be a different equation. Okay, that might be a different thing that you need to think about. Because if you have pain in your back, it may not be caused by the same thing as the pain in my back. All right, so we're coming forward and down. So interestingly, and I think I've shared this over the last few weeks, one of the things I've started playing around with to completely heal my back is actually strength training. And this is something I'd heard before, known about, and I kind of assumed, okay, well, I'm very strong. I can do things in the yoga classes that many, many people can't do. I have a lot of core stability, shoulder stability. My back seems to be very strong. But lately I've been exploring the idea that, well, maybe there are actually things that I can do to strengthen it more, or perhaps certain muscle groups in my back are not as strong as they can be. And so as I started exploring that, it did seem that my back was responding, and there was less and less pain. And then again, I had that week where I wasn't really able to continue with the strength training that I had started and the walking that I normally do and my usual routine, and my back seemed to go in the opposite direction. But I'm hopeful because there are at least several people that I've heard say that they were able to heal their pain, their back pain and back conditions, all kinds of problems, actually through strength training. And this is important. I want to share that because I have people coming up to me all the time and they're like, I have this pain. Do you have a stretch for it? And I think this is very common that if we feel a pain or discomfort, the first thing we think is, I need to stretch it. I need to stretch it out. It needs to relax. How do I relax this muscle? Sometimes that's going to be the case, but as we explore in my teachings, yin and yang. So we experience imbalance from the Taoist perspective when we have too much of something or too little of something. That is to say that pain showing up will usually, from that perspective, be the result of too much of something or too little of something. So do I have too much flexibility and stretching and whatnot? My assumption, my sort of suspicion, I'll say, my suspicion right now, I'm a yoga teacher. I'm stretching all the time. What yoga isn't maybe as known for, and if we're not careful, we miss out on, is the strengthening part. So I actually think this is too much stretching, not enough strengthening. All right, let's go ahead and come on up out of that. And then we'll do legs wide. And then we come forward and down. So this is not necessarily an easy diagnosis to make, but I'll share with you again in the way of just trying to help you understand these types of things that I'm talking about. These are things that I'm applying in my own life. So it's not some kind of abstract theory for me. This is how I actually heal my own body. This is how I actually maintain my health, the things that I share with you. So it's not so much a do what I say, not what I do kind of thing. I actually am doing these things. So I'll share with you some of the information that sort of led me to have this suspicion. So my massage therapist, very much like a yoga teacher, is very often concerned with and trying to release tension from muscles. And my body does tend to hold a lot of tension. If I do something, I'll feel it the next day, whatever it is. And again, just given the things that I do in class and the types of work that I do, I'm fairly in shape, fairly strong. So I think it's easy for one to assume, okay, you need to release tension. So my massage therapist would say, you should stretch this, you should stretch that, blah, blah, blah. And I would do it. I would go home and I'd try stretching. And we found over time, oftentimes, that things weren't necessarily getting better. And in fact, sometimes the stretches he gave me to do, that he recommended I do, is they actually made things worse. So just again, because of the flow of life, there were weeks where I would show up and I wasn't able to do any stretching. In fact, I might not have been able to be that active that week at all. And he would be like, wow, your body feels a lot better this week. So this is kind of the healing journey that you can go on. What we want, most of us, is the kind of Western idea that there's someone who knows so much about health and healing in my body that I can just show up to them and be like, hey doc, pain here, what do I do? And he says, oh, no problem, here's this pill, take it and the pain will go away. Or here's this surgery and the pain will go away. Or a physical therapist, here's this stretch, the pain will go away. Or a chiropractor, let me adjust you and the pain will go away, right? So we so often think in these terms, and sometimes that works. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't always work. If that's worked for you so far, good for you, you're very lucky. But I suspect sooner or later, especially as you age, so just go ahead and relax. As you age, you will come across something that does not conform to that. And I know some of you personally, you've already experienced that. You have pains in your body that it's not a quick, easy fix. It's more like managing something or a process to heal. And in my experience, usually the real healing happens that way. It's a journey. It's not a one and done. But in the West, this is how we are raised to think. Oh, I've got a doctor appointment with my doctor on Thursday because of this back pain, and they're going to fix it. We so often are thinking in these terms, whether we even realize it or not. And again, my experience with this is so rarely does that actually solve the problem. So rarely does that actually work. All right, let's bring the legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it out. And then we'll continue with the banana pose. So we're moving our hips to the right edge of the mat. We move our legs, arms, head, neck, shoulders to the left side of the mat. Be sure to keep your hip on the ground, okay? And we want to feel the stretch in here, in this region, the obliques and intercostal muscles on the right side. So returning to my personal journey, that experience with my massage therapist where he was sort of like, oh, okay, you didn't do much and you actually seem a little bit better. Again, that is maybe pointing the direction that maybe the pains, what's causing the pains in my body is not tightness, because everyone's got tightness in certain areas in their body. It might actually be that the muscles are overstretched, they're overworked. That, again, this is what I do for a profession. So there will be weeks where the whole week I am stretching my hamstrings aggressively to try and demonstrate peak postures to people in class. That is an occupational hazard. And that's the thing that people have to understand about teaching yoga professionally. Because I think so often people assume, oh, you're a professional yoga teacher, so you do lots of yoga and your body must just be in perfect health all the time and it's good for you. Yes and no. Yes, I stretch a lot, but again, there's such a thing as too much stretching. And when you're doing it professionally, you don't always have the luxury of saying, well, I don't really feel like stretching in this class. Because if you don't show people the peak posture, then they're going to be clueless. And as an example, the online classes that we do, say on Monday, or even in this class, I feel like the best way to teach the class is to actually be usually doing the postures in some form or another, right? Even if I don't do them perfectly with you, even if I don't do every posture, usually I'm demonstrating, at least the beginning when we come into a posture, what we want to do. Part of the reason I do this is in person I can see if someone isn't understanding and I can repeat or I can refine what I said. I can even go over to them and say, hey, that's not what I meant. Try this instead. Online, I have no idea what's going on the other end of the camera. So I'm just sort of showing, hey, it looks like this. Imitate me. Do this. It's said that some people are visual learners, some are auditory learners, others are, kinesthetic or tactile learners. And in my experience teaching, this seems to be true. Some people, you can get blue in the face talking about what they should do. Let's switch sides, okay? You'd be like, put your legs here, put your hands there, put your arms there, do this, move everything to the right or to the left. And they're just confused by that. And so you see them looking around the room. What's somebody else doing? Sometimes it's a language barrier. I had a woman in class last night. English was not her first language. So again, just when you're teaching, these are the things that you encounter. And so if I were in person, and again, if we were in person and you were one of those people, and even though I personally wasn't doing the posture, you would look around the room and you'd see someone else doing it. And then you could mimic them. But online, you can't, right? All you see are a bunch of names or maybe a few photos on your screen if you have everybody up. And if it's just me, then you just see me. So this is one of the, as strange as it might sound, occupational hazards of teaching. Because again, the important thing to remember is you can always have too much of something. Most people, the vast majority of people, are going to have a hard time getting in too much stretching or too much strengthening. Most people, vast majority of people. But someone who is, you might call a fitness professional, someone whose livelihood depends on demonstrating something with their body day after day, sometimes multiple times in a day, every week, that individual may very quickly pass over into the category of too much of something. So my current, again, suspicion and sort of strategy on healing is actually trying to stretch certain parts less and strengthen more. Again, this is the principle of yin yang. Now, it may be that ultimately to heal completely, I will also need to stretch other muscle groups, because what may be happening right now is I'm overstretching certain muscles, and they're not strong enough, because that's basically the yin yang of it. If something's overstretched, strengthen it. If something is tight or too strong, then stretch it, right? So our body generally experiences health, again, when it's in balance, when there's a balance between the muscles that are strong and the flexibility. So ideally, muscles have both, but that may not be the case. Okay, let's go ahead and come into a Sphinx. So I just want to make that clear, because I think a lot of people, again, they don't understand the occupational hazard side of teaching yoga, and they might say, well, if this guy's got pain, then he must be, I shouldn't listen to him, because what does he know if he's not able to heal himself, or if he's not in perfect health? Again, this is the occupational hazard side of what I do, and learning to manage what I do. And so I have not, at least in this current phase of my life, found that ultimate balance. My body is changing. That's part of it. I'm getting older. So when I was younger, yeah, I didn't have these problems. My back was fine. I would teach. I taught as many as 25 classes a week. Didn't have any problems. Didn't have chronic pain like that. I would have pains and they would kind of come and go. And I would get massage, I would get chiropractic work, I would get acupuncture, but it was very, it would move around a lot. And then again, before the pandemic, I had an injury that came from moving. So that injury probably came from overuse of certain muscles. And then during the pandemic, I pretty much healed that completely. My back felt like $1,000,000. And then at some point, my back went out again. Now, what's interesting about that, I suspect, is even though it was pain in my back, I think it was actually a different thing. I don't think it was the same injury. I don't think it was caused by the same thing. Because again, I think the first injury was probably caused by overuse. During the pandemic, we weren't moving that much, right? We were sitting around a lot. There's a lot of screen time, all these kinds of things. And me too. I ended up spending a lot more time sitting. And I think that, again, someone who is teaching 25 classes a week, going to teaching a handful of classes and sitting all day, that changed my body. It created changes in my body, and not for the better. So again, even though the pain was in my back, I suspect that the causes of the pain were different. And I think the way that I sit at home when I'm working is my back and my legs are actually stretched. So again, I think this is a case of overstretching, not understretching. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of our Sphinx. We'll take a rest. You might just rest on your belly if that's comfortable. You could also do like a child pose if you wanted. All right. From there, we can press back to a tabletop. We can do a little of the bear pose or cat-cow. When you're done with that, you can tuck your toes and stretch your legs in down dog. Okay, sleeping swan. So right knee comes forward, hips are down, and we want to feel that stretch right here in the right glute, okay? So for me, these things they're interesting actually. It's kind of fun. I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's almost like a detective, being a detective with your own body. Again, if we take the sort of more standard Western view, we just want to go to a quote-unquote expert. It could be a doctor. It could be a physical therapist. Could even be, again, a yoga therapist, whatever. We want a quick fix. We want to go and have the answer, right? We want to microwave the problem. Like, go see somebody, get an answer, get an MRI, do this, okay, pain's gone. And like I said, sometimes that does work. But again, I think sooner or later, you are likely to experience something that doesn't respond in that way. And rather than when Western medicine says, well, we don't know what to do. We gave you the pill and it didn't work, or we did the surgery and it didn't work, or I gave you this exercise and it didn't work. Very often people give up at that point. They just say, oh, well, my doctor says XYZ. End of story. My doctor says now I have chronic back pain and there's nothing I can do about it. You can take that and you can say, okay, that's it. End of story. Done. But what you'll find is if you talk to different doctors, if you talk to people with different experiences in the healing field. So again, if you get 10 doctors, you might get 10 different opinions. You might get 3 different opinions from 10 doctors. I don't know. It just depends. Doctors are like any other field. They are not all in agreement. And so if you have a doctor who is trained by a certain school or a certain way of thinking and a certain way of looking at things, she is going to have a very different perspective than, say, another doctor. Same with age. If your doctor graduated a long, long time ago, chances are there's a lot of stuff that they don't know about that's more current, more new, right? New remedies, new approaches. At the same time, if you have a new doctor, they might know about all the latest stuff, but they might not have much experience. So they might, again, think they know it all. Oh, I learned all this in school, but a doctor who's been around longer might have more experience. Just be like, oh, I've seen this before. You know, we need to do this thing. Even though it says in the textbook to do this, I know from experience that that's not going to work. Okay? So again, I'm not saying get a new doctor. I'm not saying get a more experienced doctor. I'm just saying don't assume all doctors are created equal and that they're all going to have the same take. This is the purpose of getting a second opinion. Okay? Now, according to a friend of mine who's a doctor, who's a surgeon, she says that Western medicine is very bad when it comes to musculoskeletal pain. And that's what I'm talking about. Okay? I'm talking about pain in my back. That is musculoskeletal pain. And so she says, according to her professional opinion, now again, you can talk to another doctor and they might disagree with her, but according to her, that's not one of the strengths of Western medicine, dealing with musculoskeletal pain. And when we're talking about Western medicine, we're generally talking about drugs and surgery. So there's a whole field of healing like acupuncture, chiropractic, therapeutic massage, yoga therapy, all these types of things that try and deal with musculoskeletal issues in a different way. they aren't necessarily shunned or banned by Western medical professionals, but generally Western medical professionals are not that familiar with that. Because again, usually when you go to a doctor, she has spent most of her education and career dealing with two modalities, which is drugs and surgery. Drugs and surgery. It's beginning to change, and you might meet a doctor who's much more prolific in the tools that she recommends and uses. That's awesome. But most doctors, it's difficult to be a doctor. Again, as you know, some of you may know, my ex was a surgeon, and I saw how hard that life is on the doctor. The way that they treat people in medicine, it's not pretty. So if you think, well, my doctor should just be interested in all these different things and learn about all the new different modalities, forget about it. There's no way. They are already overwhelmed in what they're asked to do. So you aren't necessarily going to get the full range of what's possible for you to heal or deal with your problem from your doctor, your medical professional, because they just don't know everything. They don't have time for all of that. So if you go to the doctor, they give you something and it works, awesome, perfect. But if it doesn't, I wouldn't necessarily assume that that means nothing will work. Let's go ahead and come on out of that. Even though your doctor might say that. They may very well say, yep, there's nothing we can do. You can't heal that. That's going to always be like that, whatever it is. Okay, saddle pose. So toes can point back, toes can point out to the side, knees can be together, knees can be apart. And if you're feeling a strong stretch in the front of your thighs, I recommend just staying upright, staying like this. Just let those thighs stretch, okay? If you don't feel stretched out, you can begin coming back, and you might make your way all the way back onto your back or a bolster or something else. So again, I want to be very clear. I am not saying ignore your doctor. I am not saying your doctor doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm not saying anything like that. I am saying no doctor knows everything. And that's just a factual statement. Okay? No doctor knows everything. No doctor is always right. If you meet a doctor who says, I'm always right, or I know everything, you should go find another doctor, because that means that that doctor is just not in touch with reality. That doctor, we would say, has a God complex. So Gray Cook, who is a physical therapist, a coach, he's a really, really bright individual in kind of the performance and healing field. Very curious individual, open-minded. He put it this way. I'm trying to remember the exact quote. I may mess it up a little bit, but the gist of what he said was, the brightest person in the room, or the most aware person in the room, the most awake person in the room, is the person who, he said the most objective person in the room is the person who knows they can't be objective. All right, I'll repeat it. The most objective person in the room is the person who understands that they can't be objective. So this is essentially what we're talking about here, that a doctor who recognizes, hey, I can't know everything. I'm not always right. I make mistakes. That is the kind of person that you want to work with, because they are actually seeing the reality of the situation. And ironically, they're a lot more likely to be right because they're willing to be wrong. Someone who insists on being right, no, I'm always right. I'm right about this. That's somebody who's very dangerous, because they're afraid of being wrong, and they're not willing to admit it, right? Because for some reason they think it's like a horrible thing to be wrong. We all make mistakes. We're all wrong. It's inevitable. So might as well embrace the fact and actually bake it in. Know that a certain percentage of the time you're going to be wrong, and be willing to switch course, be willing to change. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that one and just rest for a few months. All right, let's bring those legs in, give them a little squeeze. And then we'll take the right knee over the left knee, and we'll drop our knees to the left. So again, for a long time, I didn't really experience anything like what I'm talking about, any kind of chronic pain. The reason why you're likely to experience it at some point, and again, I'm not alone, other people my age, younger, are experiencing these things as they get a little older. People I know, people I talk to, even some people I know who are very young already have issues with chronic pain. So generally what happens is as you age, inflammation will increase in your body. Full stop. We don't exactly know why, and we're not really certain how to prevent it. There are various things you can do to try and reduce inflammation. Foods you can eat, activities that you can do, things that you can abstain from. But pretty much, at least where things stand right now, is there is this inevitable increase in inflammation as you age. Injuries that maybe feel like they had healed before, they may start hurting again at a certain age because the inflammation is increasing. And what studies show is that sites where there are old injuries, very often these are sites where we get more inflammation, even more inflammation, okay? So just think of it like a, like a temperature. So when you're young, your temperature is very low. You get hurt, your temperature might rise, but then it goes back down, right? You get inflammation temporarily, because inflammation actually helps you heal. Just FYI, it's not a useless process. It's like anything else, too much of it is a problem. And generally, as you start to age, so I would say probably above 40, anywhere above 40, so 40, 50, 60, things that didn't used to hurt and seemed fine, things you will begin to find that maybe those certain areas start to hurt, and it just hurts. And it doesn't go away, and it doesn't go down. So again, this is so common and this is so established that some people even call it inflammaging, because you're aging, but the inflammation's going up. And we don't know, is like the inflammation causing the aging, or is the aging causing the inflammation? Like, what is the relationship there? We don't know. All we know is we see that correlation between the two. Let's switch sides. So I remember until pretty recently, honestly, until the last, I'd say 5 years probably, I would hear about people with chronic pain, issues, whatever, and it was just sort of like, oh, that's not my reality. I don't experience that. If I get hurt, it heals. If I have pain, it goes away. And so again, what I'm likely experiencing in my body is this inflammaging. The inflammation has reached a point where something that is damaged or hurts, there's enough inflammation already there that it sort of pushes it over the edge, and there's like a chronic kind of pain. Now, again, I'll repeat, I fully believe I will heal. And I'm doing everything in my power to keep my inflammation down. And again, there's a lot you can do. I post about this on my Patreon page from time to time. I find interesting videos or articles about inflammation, particularly, and I'll post. So you can check that out as a resource. But you can also just Google it. You can just get on Google, how do I reduce inflammation? Ways to reduce inflammation. So turmeric is a big one. Clean water, and I'm sorry, clean water is a little more than just a Brita filter. So again, if you want specific recommendations, you can reach out to me, but it's going to take a little more research than just buying the first filter water pitcher that you find on Amazon. Unfortunately, that might do some good, but there's so much stuff in our drinking water. Another alternative is don't drink tap water. Buy water from a pure source in glass bottles. You don't want to drink out of plastic, generally speaking. It's a whole nother issue. Clean sources of food, because again, certain foods can cause inflammation. What's called earthing or grounding, very important. And I guess, again, there's various ways to do that. Icing or cold exposure. And then the opposite, heat. Exposing yourself like in a sauna to an extreme of heat. So the cold and the heat is a short period of time. So it's extreme and it's relatively short. So a 2-minute ice bath or cold water shower, that's by most accounts currently a good amount. You do that daily or 4 times a week, that's going to help with inflammation. The sauna, same thing. It's 15, 20, 30 minutes in that extreme of heat is about all you need or want, but many times a week. Okay, next posture. You can fold over your legs, right? That's the caterpillar. Again, part of my job is to help show people because sometimes people get confused regardless, okay? And then the other is to go back into the snail pose, which is an inversion. It's a little more advanced, and I don't think I'm going to demo that today. So if you know how to do it, you want to do it, you're welcome to. But otherwise, this is perfectly good here. Okay, so inflammation, that is an issue that we will likely encounter if we're excuse me, if we're lucky enough to live long enough, right? So in a sense, it's like nice problem to have, because if you're dealing with inflammaging, probably means you've lived a good 40, 50 years on this planet. Not everybody gets that opportunity. Again, inflammation is a problem all around, and our lifestyle, our current lifestyle, what's considered the standard American lifestyle, it very much encourages inflammation. So you might be 20, 30, in your 20s, 30s, and already experiencing some of the things I'm talking about. You may already have inflammation, or you might have injuries in parts of your body that are chronically inflamed. So a big part of the healing journey is reducing the inflammation. Again, inflammation is helpful short term. If you bump your elbow and you hurt it, it will get inflamed temporarily. You don't want to stop that. You want to allow that, because that is part of the healing process. However, after 24 hours, 48 hours, a week, that inflammation needs to go away in order for the healing process to complete. And what we're finding happening in our bodies, especially as we get older, is that inflammation response doesn't turn off. And what that leads to, again, is chronic pain. Pain that is just always there, or it's right around the corner. Like maybe you're not, like right now I'm not in pain, but I know that I can do certain things to induce or create pain that are normally within my normal range of motion. Like this should not cause back pain, and yet it does for me. And again, this is one of the messages that I hope to get across to you all, is that we should not experience pain within a normal, healthy range of motion. If we do, that means we have a medical issue. So if I do this and I'm experiencing pain, my back, I have a medical issue. That means I need to address that issue medically. All right, I can manage it in yoga, but it's not like yoga is going to heal that necessarily, or that yoga is, you can do yoga with all these injuries. You know, if you have a lot of injuries and you need to manage them, then you need to see a yoga therapist, not a standard class like this one. Because this kind of class is generally meant for people who are in relatively healthy condition. Like I said, even though I know I have a medical issue, I've been dealing with this and with yoga long enough to know that I'll live. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Might not be the best thing for me to stretch like that, but it's also not going to be devastating in any way. Okay, let's go ahead and come on up and out of that. Just relax back on your back. So anyway, it is my hope and intention that sharing these things from my own journey, that they fill in kind of these, the picture of the types of things that I share with you in the class. And again, my intention in sharing it is to hopefully educate you about things that you might otherwise not hear. Why do I assume this? Because I didn't hear these things before I started studying them and learning about them. So these are all things that if I were a student in my own class, that I would want to know about and I'd want to hear about. That's basically what I'm doing. You may be like, Doug, I don't want to hear about inflammation. I'm over it. I'm fine. Okay, I can't please everybody, but my intention is that this information will come in useful at some point in your life, if not today. All right, so you can give yourself a little counter stretch, and I'm going to leave it up to you whether or not you want to take a relaxation or not. It's never a bad idea. So we have time. It's early, so you certainly can relax.